I should have known better. I was a crunchy mama. I know this stuff happens, and I know there's gaslighting. I have a good friend who got 40 units of Botox. She was paralyzed for months. At 2.5 years out, she is still recovering. Every day I just wake up and I'm like, I'm the luckiest person alive because I really feel like I dodged a bullet.
In a world obsessed with convenience and quick fixes, I'm approaching wellness differently. After healing from chronic illness by overhauling my entire life, I'm now on a mission to help women like me to thrive and not just survive. I'm Kristen, and you're listening to the OrganiMama Podcast. If you're pregnant postpartum or running on newborn sleep, this one's for you. Your body goes through a lot during this season, and I've learned the hard way that gentle support matters. That's why I've been using the Loombox, an at-home red and near-infrared light therapy device that supports energy, recovery, mood, and muscle soreness. It's FDA-registered, non-invasive, low EMF, and takes just a few minutes a day. No supplements to remember, no extra decisions, just light doing its thing while you rest. Check the show notes for the Loombox link and use my code OrganiMama for 40% off, because taking care of yourself is taking care of your baby. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the OrganiMama Podcast. I am super excited to be here today with Megan McCue. She is a speech language pathologist and the author of 2 books called No-Tox and Me Tox Pretty. In 2024, she developed iatrogenic botulism after trying a small amount of Botox for the first time. And she has since become a passionate advocate for medical informed consent and pharmaceutical transparency. When she's not working or blogging about all things botulism, she can be found with her husband, 3 kids, or piano. Welcome, Megan. We are super excited to have you on the podcast today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Kristen. I'm so glad we're connecting.
Yes. Now, this is a really interesting topic today. I have talked briefly about Botox before on my page and my platform, but you definitely have a much more personal, probably emotional experience regarding Botox. So let's dive right in. I want to hear the whole story of why this is a topic that matters a lot to you.
Right. And I'll try to give you the 5-minute version, not the hour-long version of what happened to me, because Kristen, I am so similar to probably all of your audience. I am like the quintessential crunchy California mom. Okay. I read all the labels. I filter all the water. I check all the boxes, but even I fell for the Botox lie because I feel like the marketing is so insidious, and you go to Google it. And mind you, I take 0 other pharmaceuticals, right? I've got all my earthly tinctures up in my cabinet, but my friends were doing Botox and my sister had done Botox. And I kind of just started thinking, what if I tried just a tiny little bit right here in my crow's feet? I smile a lot, so I've got those nice crow's feet. And I'd been seeing this doctor for multiple years for something called microneedling. It's like a facial with mini needles that doesn't use any pharmaceuticals. And she did a lot of Botox, and she also gave it out to patients. And I remember asking her, what are the side effects? Because I know that there's something related to botulism, but I didn't really understand. And she's like, oh my gosh, no, of course not. Like, that never happens. You would need copious amounts of Botox to get botulism, right? So I said, you know what? I think I want to try just this tiny little amount. And I told her, I'd had a relationship with her. We talked about our kids' lives, everything. And I said, I'm a little nervous, so I just want to try the smallest amount you've given anyone.
Mm-hmm.
I literally got 12 units, 6 on each side. Most people that go in for cosmetic treatment might be getting anywhere from like 30 to 50 units. And what happened was, immediately after she injected me, I just started having the weirdest neurological symptoms.
Mm.
Like, I remember looking around the room and I was kind of like, whoa, like I couldn't focus on anything. I started feeling a lot of head pressure, and I thought, gosh, everything just started feeling very strange, kind of brain foggy. And I immediately said something. I was like, wow, is this normal? Like, I don't feel right. And she thought I was having a vasovagal response.
Yep.
And I wasn't. And so I just kind of sat there. She made sure I wasn't having any kind of allergic reaction like anaphylaxis, and then just kind of dismissed me, like didn't even really address my concerns. So I got out to my car and I just remember thinking I couldn't concentrate on anything and everything felt weird. Well, within the next few days, my body basically started going into fight or flight completely unprovoked, right? So I started getting heart palpitations. And I mean, if you've ever done a drug like cocaine or MDMA, I hate to say it that way, but that's what it felt like. It was like I was on high alert. I couldn't get my body to calm down. And normally I'm as calm as a mom can be with 3 kids, but I certainly had never had physical anxiety in my life like this. And I remember talking to my sister and saying, gosh, I've had these weird symptoms. Everything has just been strange. So about a week passes, I start losing copious amounts of hair. And I had never lost hair. I'd been through 4 postpartums at this point because I have 3 children and I also had a miscarriage, a stillborn. So I had never lost hair, noticeably, right? And I remember thinking, well, that's weird. I'm having some kind of delayed postpartum hair loss. A couple of days go by and I start, like every 3 to 4 days, I start having these intense anxiety rushes with heart palpitations. I start having all kinds of neurological symptoms like the ones I was getting the day of injection. So brain fog, dizziness and nausea, and just all these weird symptoms that personally I had never had before.
Wow.
And it, in some ways it almost felt like COVID because I was starting to get fatigued a lot and the brain fog, and it was hard for me to do my job. Well, within a month, so right around the month mark after injections, I basically stopped making saliva. And my mouth became, like I was making probably 10%. And for your listeners, I'm a speech language pathologist. So a lot of what I do is work with adults who have strokes, who have brain injuries, who are experiencing difficulty speaking and swallowing. Well, I stopped being able to swallow properly because I wasn't making enough saliva. So the solid food that would go down would just get stuck. And I was, clearing my throat for hours after a meal. And I'm looking around me like nothing has felt right since the day I got this Botox. But everything I was reading online was making, I was trying to look up Botox side effects. I wasn't really finding what I was experiencing. And I can explain that in a little bit, but basically there's a very wide range of symptoms that people can experience after these injections. And a lot of it depends on how much of the toxin spreads. So I believe I was hit in a blood vessel because I started having immediate symptoms, right? And I think the only thing that saved me from having a more severe course of botulism was that I did receive such a small amount that day.
Yeah.
So my symptoms all kind of took a few weeks to kick in. But I mean, there are no words for how horrific this was to live through, because it's essentially what happened to me was vagus nerve disruption. So my vagus nerve, for those who are familiar, starts in the brainstem, goes all the way down to the gut. And this nerve, this bundle of nerves, is so important for all of our bodily systems, right? Our breathing, our digestion, our swallowing, our heart rate, being able to monitor our heart rate and our blood pressure. This is what's happening in botulism, or in Botox poisoning, as they call it. People are getting, they can really have disruption in any nerve, but specifically the vagus nerve when they're experiencing things like dry mouth, difficulty swallowing, difficulty breathing, which I also experienced for a few weeks, and that was horrific and scary. But I'll shut up because you probably have questions.
I do.
And I can talk forever about this.
Yeah.
So
oh my gosh. Okay. This is a crazy story. Okay. I do have some questions. Okay. My first question is, do you think that you mentioned that you think that the Botox went into a vein. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that was what partially or significantly contributed to the fact that you got so sick. Do you think that has anything to do with the amount of experience that an injector has? Like, would you say that there are like this could happen to anyone, no matter who's doing the injection on them? Or would you say that there are like some injectors that are like more experienced that know to avoid like hitting a blood vessel?
That's a really great question, because you'll see a lot of that rhetoric online, like, oh, you just went to an inexperienced provider. No, I didn't. I went to a medical doctor who's been doing this for over 10 years, right? And injecting herself, by the way. So what I have learned is that oftentimes, when we're doing cosmetic Botox, these providers are blindly injecting people in the face. They are not using imaging to see if they're hitting a blood vessel. And that's why I tell people it is Russian roulette, because while many people won't have these, more severe reactions and adverse events, there are enough people having them. And we know that from things like the FDA FAERS database. And I hear from people every single day who have these reactions. So, and I'm a nobody, right? I'm just a suburban mom who decided to start talking about this. So, but what's happening is they can happen at different degrees. So there's very mild botulism, which might just result in, some dry mouth. Maybe you have some dry eyes. Maybe you experience some hair loss or some difficulty swallowing here and there, and you're not really sure why. Because what I can tell you is I've met women who were doing this for 5, 10, 15 years, never had a single side effect until one day, bam, everything goes wrong. And it's the same provider they've been seeing. I know women who went to Allergan trained injectors, meaning Allergan's the company that owns Botox. So these are injectors that train other injectors, right? None of them are using imaging. They are just blindly injecting people. So, they'll try to tell you that the more experienced someone is, the less likely these things are to happen. But the reality is it is just Russian roulette. And you never, ever know when you're going to be the next victim. And in fact, what I started learning once I got in this world and started connecting with more and more people this had happened to, is that almost every single one of us was gaslit or ignored by our injector afterwards.
Wow.
And just told, nope, none of that was from the Botox. In my own case, I was calling my injector the next day saying, I feel so strange. I'm dizzy. I'm nauseous. I have head pressure. I've never felt like this before in my life. Don't worry, you're just anxious. That's all she said to me. I had bloodshot eyes the very next day, which indicated to me that a blood vessel had absolutely been injured somehow. I was told it was allergies. It's unbelievable what people go through who experience these side effects, because they're actually all listed on the product insert when you start reading it. I listened to one of your episodes a while back with the lady from Just the Inserts.
Alexandra.
Is that, yeah. And it is the same thing. And that's why I say I should have known better. I was a crunchy mama. I know this stuff happens, and I know there's gaslighting, and I know there's corruption.
Yeah.
But it's all the same with Botox. And to think that it's any different than any other pharmaceutical, it's not. This stuff is it's all listed in the fine print. The injectors aren't even reading it. So many of the injectors aren't aware of these side effects. And you'll find thousands of reports at the FDA of botulism after Botox. Just last year, 2024, over 600 deaths from these products. Well, we all know that you really need to multiply that by 10 or 20 to get the real number, because so many are underreported, right? And it's once you start pulling back the layers and really trying to figure out what's going on, it's a story of immense corruption, which is why I ended up writing my book, No Tox, which kind of goes through some of the history of the drug.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about the history of the drug a little bit. So Botox is short for botulinum toxin, right? Can you explain to the listeners a little bit about the actual chemical function of Botox and why it works for certain medical purposes and why it's used for cosmetic purposes, and then how it poses harm to human health?
Right. So botulinum toxin is the main ingredient in all of these products. So there's Botox, Dysport, Xeomin. There's multiple different brands. They all have botulinum toxin type A, which is the toxin that grows on bacteria in tainted foods. That's how people used to get foodborne botulism, is they would end up eating copious amounts of this toxin and have horrific botulism that was essentially like a 70% death rate back in the day.
That's like what's common in honey, which is why honey is not recommended for children under 12 months.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it can grow in really any canned, it typically kind of grows in homemade canned foods. But we see it sometimes even in commercialized foods. You'll see like Google alerts. I get them all now. I'm like, I need to know every food that has botulism in it so I don't ever get this again. But, canned tuna, that kind of stuff. So that toxin is what they purify and put into this drug. And they claim that it's diluted, but 1 unit of this stuff contains millions of molecules of the toxin. Every single one of those molecules can attach to a nerve synapse. So here's where we're going to get a little sciencey. So bear with me, guys. I'm going to explain it as simply as possible. Our nervous system is made up of nerve cells that connect, right? And they connect at what's called the nerve synapse. So what the toxin does once it comes into the body, either through injection, through eating it, whatever, is it is attaching to the nerve synapses and blocking the transmission of neurotransmitters, of those chemical messages that send the message, for example, to our muscles. Hey, move the muscle. That's acetylcholine that does that, right? And in the rest of our nervous system, we have neurotransmitters that you guys have heard of, like dopamine, serotonin, GABA you might have heard of, or glutamate. That's the major excitatory neurotransmitter in our brain. Guess what? Botulinum neurotoxin can block all of those neurotransmitters if it spreads throughout your bloodstream and into your brain, as it did in my case and many thousands of other people. So what happens when Botox doesn't spread is it just stays at the neuromuscular junction. So that's going to be where the nerve meets up with your muscles, and it's going to paralyze those muscles temporarily. So this is why Botox is used for muscle spasms or people who have a lot of spasticity or tension in the muscles, because
or like TMJ.
Yeah, so that is actually TMJ pain and migraines is a different mechanism. I'll talk about that in a second. It's actually because the toxin can also block another thing called substance P. But this toxin is not specific to acetylcholine. And that's what you'll often see on Google. Oh, it blocks acetylcholine. It blocks acetylcholine. Well, multiple studies now at this point, I mean, over 15 years worth of research has shown that it actually blocks a lot more than acetylcholine. And that is why when this toxin gets into the bloodstream, it can absolutely get into our brains via the brainstem or via something called retrograde axonal transport, where it hops back along the nerve cells into the central nervous system. And this is a huge topic right now. There's more and more influencers, so to speak, that are speaking out about this, because what we have not been told by any Botox injectors is that this toxin is more than capable of spreading up into the central nervous system, into our brains, and blocking critical neurotransmitters, dopamine, serotonin, glutamate. We already named a few of those, noradrenaline, and GABA. GABA is that neurotransmitter that calms the body down, that says everything's okay, right? And I know for sure that what I experienced was severe central nervous system disruption, because I felt, Kristen, like my IQ had dropped 40 points for months. I'm a speech language pathologist. So I'm typically, I'm one-on-one with patients. I consider myself pretty sharp, pretty bright. I'm able to usually be there emotionally for my patients, because a lot of the therapy is also just talking to people. I was not able to do any of this for months. I could barely read. It took all the concentration in my body to just listen to my husband tell me something about our kids.
Wow.
And at this point, my husband, by the way, was taking care of all 3 of our kids on his own. He was doing all of the household chores, all of the grocery shopping, the meal cooking. My husband is a rock, okay? He is the reason we survived this, because for months I was on the couch, incapacitated, completely fatigued, couldn't swallow solid foods, could barely think. The brain fog was so intense. And so the toxin itself is really disrupting the nervous system. And it's so scary because you just never know where the toxin's going to land. It might stay at your muscle junction. That'd be great. Hey, then you get the paralyzed forehead that doesn't move, right? But even in that case, people don't realize that if you're not moving your muscles, you're not getting blood flow to those muscles. The lymph system is stagnant, so you're not really like detoxing at all. I mean, this stuff just isn't even good when it goes right and doesn't cause botulism, right?
Yeah.
So it's yeah.
So how did you recover? What did you do to heal from that? And what was the turning point for you where you started realizing that you were getting better? Because obviously we're having this conversation right now, and what you're describing does not seem to be your current situation. Have you ever picked up a makeup product, flipped it over, and thought, why does this ingredient list look like a chemistry final? Because same. I used to spend hours online trying to figure out if a product was actually non-toxic or just greenwashed with pretty packaging, and it was exhausting. So I actually did the work for you. After 5 years of deep research, I created OrganiBeauty, which is a guide that breaks down over 80 toxic ingredients to avoid, 5 that you should always recognize, and nearly 200 safer product recommendations for women, men, and kids. If you want to clean up your personal care routine without losing your mind, check the show notes and grab OrganiBeauty. Podcast listeners can get 20% off with code podcast.
No. And I was so lucky. Oh my gosh. Every day I just wake up and I'm like, I'm the luckiest person alive, because I really feel like I dodged a bullet because I asked for such a small amount that day. And the other thing, Kristen, is I was that crunchy mama going into this. I wasn't on any pharmaceuticals. I eat whole organic foods, home cooked meals. I was going into this without ever having a single medical condition, except for like some slight anemia in pregnancy. Okay, we all get that at the end, And so I was going into this healthy as an ox. And I had such a small amount. So slowly but surely over time, I did start to get better. At 6 months out from my injections, I turned a really big healing curve. And from there, it just kept getting better. So the difficulty swallowing remediated within about 3 months. So for 3 months, I basically couldn't swallow solid foods.
Wow.
So I was pureeing everything. I'm lucky I had the training I do as a speech pathologist to be able to know how to get protein and calories in on liquids. Another symptom I had that really bothered me that ended up lasting a very long time was ear congestion. So if you've ever had that feeling of stuffy ears, it's an autonomic nervous system dysregulation symptom. And so I would be with a patient like, excuse me, while I blow my ears, that thing you have to do when you get off a plane. And that ended up lasting 8 months. It was 8 months of hell. It was 24/7 ear clog.
Wow.
The dry mouth. So the intense anxiety and panic remediated over the course of about 3 months. Insomnia got better. The brain fog and the cognitive symptoms did take a little bit longer, but by about 5 months out from injections, I was feeling at least well enough to write my memoir. And then within the next month, I wrote No Tox. And what happened was I joined this whole huge support group for people who are going through this. And I learned so much from other people that have suffered from this. And in that group, I met a researcher who had been studying this stuff for over 10 years. She had a friend who had iatrogenic botulism back in the early 2000s, and she had cataloged so much research, and she shared a lot of that research with me so that I was able to read through it all in preparation for writing No Tox, because the history of the drug is that of course it started for medical purposes, but it was, I think it was early, it was like 2001 when they started using it for cosmetic purposes. The reality is, since that time, the FDA has been receiving reports of botulism. And they told the manufacturers, okay, well, you have to put the black box warning on it, right? Because this is killing people. They were receiving death reports. They were receiving botulism reports. And so they finally put the black box warning on. And now that it's on, the manufacturers basically just wash their hands clean. And that's what I wanted to show in the book, was that this company is not interested in whether or not it harms you. It is telling you on the product insert that no one is reading that it can kill you, okay, or cause severe adverse events that nobody knows how long they'll last, right? Because the manufacturers are like, oh, we're not going to do that research. We don't care. So the message I'm trying to get out to people is that these drugs are incredibly dangerous. And if it happens to you, there's no doctor that's on your side. There's no one that can help you. So the manufacturer will tell you, like in the Botox commercials, oh, go to the ER if you have botulism. Well, here's what ends up happening. You go to the ER, no one takes you seriously. Because, and this will be interesting for your husband to learn, there are no objective tests for botulism. There is one that requires they draw your blood, send it to the CDC in Georgia, inject it into a mouse, and see if the mouse dies of botulism within a week.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, that's not going to help anyone when someone's suffering from difficulty breathing, right, from botulism, or cardiac arrest, which are the two most common ways that people die after Botox, are heart attacks and respiratory failure.
Yeah.
So what ends up happening is there's no objective tests. All of your vital signs come back normal. All of your labs come back normal. But you're telling the doctors, no, my life was normal. And then I got these injections and everything since has been hell on earth. So many of us are ignored. So many of us are gaslit. And I really, at this point, have only heard of a handful of people who got the antitoxin. Thankfully, there is more and more awareness about this growing, because ironically, it's actually happening because people are getting counterfeit Botox, which is the same toxin, by the way. It's just higher at a higher concentration. And because more and more people are getting sick from the counterfeit, there's more awareness growing about iatrogenic botulism. But what we've seen in this world is that the news will typically only cover the cases when it comes from counterfeit. And they kind of just sweep all the rest of us under a rug who are like, hey, I actually got this from legit Botox from an experienced provider. And it, very much ruined my life. So.
Okay. So you mentioned an antitoxin. Can you explain a little bit more what that is and how it's used? Yeah.
The antitoxin is actually made from horse proteins. They make antibodies from horse proteins, and it will essentially stop the toxin in its tracks in the whatever's left in the bloodstream. It cannot undo the damage that has already been done to the nervous system. So what happens when the toxin gets into those nerve synapses, we mentioned that before, those nerve synapses are permanently damaged. What the body does is it has to regrow new nerve synapses, those new dendrites around the ones that are permanently damaged.
And that's a slow process.
It's a slow process, especially when you're talking about central nervous system, right?
Yeah.
The brain seems to take longer. I just know this from working with brain injured patients, like stroke patients, Parkinson's, that those can take a lot longer, like more than 6 months to regrow. What I tend to see, like in the botulism literature from foodborne days, is that usually the difficulty swallowing and the more peripheral nervous system symptoms, the ones that actually happen throughout the body, those tend to remediate a little bit faster than the central nervous system ones. There are reports of people 2.5 years, 4 years out from Botox and still suffering from brain fog, fatigue. I have a good friend who got 40 units So this is important. All the women listen up to this. 40 units of Botox. She was paralyzed for months. At 2.5 years out, she is still recovering. She can only walk. She can't run any longer. She was a marathon. She ran half marathons. So right now her exercise is limited to walks. And even then she might be sore the next day because of all of the muscle weakness that happened throughout her body. And this woman was, of course, gaslit, not told about the antitoxin, was at the ER. Like, I think what's important for people to understand is we are going to the ER. We are begging doctors for help and we are not getting it. And that's why I work so hard to raise awareness. And I really am trying to educate my own field, speech language pathologists, about this. We are the ones who are dealing with patients who can't swallow properly, can't speak properly. But I'm trying to get into the world of medical doctors because I feel like if people could just ask the question when people show up to the ER with these symptoms, have you received Botox in the past 2 to 4 weeks? If we could just get people asking that screening question, I think we could be catching a lot more of these cases and getting people the antitoxin. Yeah. The antitoxin, it can only be ordered from the CDC. The CDC will fly it to your hospital with armed guards because this is a biological weapon. This botulinum toxin is the most lethal substance on the planet. Okay. That's what the fact that we think we can get away with injecting this and never see side effects it's absurd. Let's be honest.
That is so crazy.
I know. So
Megan, first of all, I just want to say to you and anyone else who has experienced something similar with being gaslit in the ER, I am so heartbroken and I'm so sorry for you that has been your experience. Obviously, listeners know that I'm really passionate about raising up a generation of great medical doctors, and I'm married to one who's going to be in the ER. And actually, at the time of recording this, tomorrow is his very first day. And I think that there are good doctors out there that genuinely want to help people. They just need the right kind of knowledge on these topics. And so what you're doing is so admirable by the books that you've written and the work that you're doing to help spread the word about how this is a bigger issue than most people realize. And I just want to commend you for that because you're doing great work and it's an important message.
Thank you. And I will add that I actually have a third book because I'm crazy. Okay. I love to write. That's, I've always been a writer, but I did in fact write a book. My latest book is called Iatrogenic Botulism 101, and it is intended for doctors, nurses, healthcare providers, injectors. There's no bias, there's no I'm so mad about my Botox injections. No, it is pure facts. All of the information is from either the medical literature, the CDC, or the FDA. So I'm getting pure facts. I am compiling them in this book and teaching doctors, here are the signs and symptoms. Here's what to do if this happens to your patient. Here's the prognosis. Here are some therapies that can help afterwards. A lot of people get what's called MCAS, mast cell activation syndrome. You've probably heard of it You can get it from mold and other things too. A lot of people end up with that after Botox poisoning. The body's creating antibodies to try to get rid of the toxin, and those antibodies release mast cells. Yep. So there's a huge, so that's important, right, for doctors to know so that they can help manage the MCAS if people get that. So my latest book, Iatrogenic Botulism 101, if any of your audience even just knows a doctor, like a primary care or someone in the ER, tell them about it because it really could save a life. The more and more doctors that are aware of these symptoms and aware of how to get antitoxin, how to get help, because antitoxin really is the only treatment we have at this point.
Sure. Okay. So as far as moving forward, there's kind of 2 categories of people that I'm thinking of in my head, or maybe there's 3 categories of people that would be listening to this. One would be people who are like, I don't really care about cosmetic injections. I don't really mind that my face is aging, and I would never consider that. That's not something I'm interested in. So that's one category. Another category of person, it would say, okay, I hear this. I understand the risk. I'm still not totally convinced that that would ever happen to me. And I think that I might still want to get Botox sparingly or more than sparingly. What advice would you give to that person who says, I understand that there's risk, I still want to move forward with it? What would you share with them in regards of steps that they could take to try and minimize the potential of the Russian roulette, and or things to watch for themselves physically or neurologically after they have an injection?
Yeah. This is the audience I want to reach because I want them to see what happened to me and see that I was that crunchy mom, checking all the boxes, never had a single health condition in my life, and 12 units sent me into an illness where I could not care for my children, you guys. I had a baby actually at the time, 10-month-old. I could not care for my children for months. And the repercussions of that, of course, is, you can imagine the stress that puts on a family. And so I really want to reach that audience and tell them that there is no mitigating risk here. It is pure. It's just either you're lucky or you're not lucky.
Yeah.
And I want those people to also know that Botox in the long run is not healthy for your skin. It actually kind of does the opposite of what it's supposed to do. It's going to eventually make you look older because it's paralyzing your muscles. Imagine the way that you're thinking about someone's legs. What does the skin look like over an atrophied muscle versus a strong, healthy muscle? I mean, that's what your skin is going to start to look like because your muscles are paralyzed. They are going to atrophy over time, and your skin's going to begin to look thin and sallow. What we see is a lot of dark circles with people who have done Botox for a long time. And I would encourage those people to really start looking at alternatives because there are so many great alternatives these days. I personally am a big fan of the microneedling. It's a natural collagen booster, whole healthy organic diet with lots of fat. Lots of good healthy fats is what's going to help that skin glow because you're giving your skin the fat soluble vitamins it needs. There's a whole trend of face taping, which is great. You're just using tape like the Frownies or the kinesiology tape to keep those wrinkles kind of stagnant.
Training your face to relax the muscles when they don't need to be used. Yeah.
Exactly. Not squinting at your computer all day, which we can all be guilty of. Cupping I've gotten into. I was on another podcast and the woman who hosted it was all about facial cupping. So I've been trying that, but just wearing hats too. Like I'm a big hat wearer now just to kind of minimize the amount of sun I get on my face. Yep. I get sun on the rest of my body because I want the vitamin D.
Same,
but,
yes.
But yeah, and I admire that first category of people you're talking about because, man, I want to be like that. I want to care less about what my face looks like. And I will tell you that I did learn that lesson the really hard way, that what matters in life is our health, our happiness, the health of our children, our family. When mom is out and down on the couch because she's so ill with these Botox side effects, the whole family is just kind of crumbles.
It's a
right?
ripple effect. Yeah,
it is. And I want women to know that it is just not worth it. And there are great alternatives. And even if you get the tiniest amount of Botox, it can send your body into a whirlwind. One of the ladies in the support group I run now, 5 units of Botox once. She's been in 6 months of MCAS hell, mast cell activation. Yep. And that is not an easy thing to treat. People, it can take the body years to work through that and to heal from that.
Wow.
So
Megan, this is crazy. And I feel like I've definitely, like I said, I've shared some about like my understanding of Botox and I've also heard from others, but it's so enlightening to hear from you because I think a lot of times people will assume, well, if I only get just a little bit, then my risk is super tiny, but it's really fascinating to hear you share about how you had like the smallest possible amount and still had all of these the crazy impact of it. And I was also thinking about the fact that, we have this celebrity culture that is promoting like permanently youthful skin, and knowing that Botox injections actually over time decreases the youthfulness of your skin makes me just think about the fact that these, 70-year-old celebrities that still look like they're in their 40s have to be getting so many injections and plastic surgery to look that way, because it snowballs. Like, you have to get more and more to even maintain that quote unquote youthful look. And it just makes me hurt for all of these people who are looking to that standard, who are wanting to embrace their natural aging. And then the standard that we have that's plastered all over our magazines and social media and TV are these people who are just constantly going in and getting injected with toxins. And who even knows how many people in the Hollywood realm have had negative side effects, because they're probably not ever going to speak up about it.
Well, and in fact, I have heard from 2 celebrities. One was in another country. Of course, I'm not going to mention their names. What ends up happening with people who have money who get this is they typically sue or they settle with the manufacturers and sign an NDA. Yeah. And there are so many, I've heard from multiple people who have been offered NDAs by these companies, but they have to zip their lips afterwards, right? So thankfully there are plenty of women who don't take the NDAs so that they can speak about their experience. I would encourage people to mostly just get off social media as much as they can. But if they're going to be on it, follow people who are aging naturally. Follow people who have real lines. You guys, these are unavoidable. We smile, we make emotions. It's okay to have lines on your face. Yes. It does not make you less beautiful. Look at my mom. I talk about this in the book. There's a picture of my mom, and I was like, my mom is the most beautiful person I know. And that lady's got all the wrinkles. Okay. Because she's beautiful inside, she's inside and out beautiful. And I was going to say, so mostly get off social media, but if you are going to be on it, follow people who age naturally, and also follow people who are talking about their Botox illness, because they will tell you that there's tons of Instagram accounts. I can send you some for the show notes. They will tell you that since they've been speaking out about their Botox poisoning, they receive hundreds, if not thousands of messages from other people this has happened to. People who maybe don't want to speak out about it or don't have a large audience or things like that, where, some people need to be left alone to heal, really. Yeah. But these people come out of the woodwork, and it's like, my doctor gaslit me too. My friends gaslit me who get Botox and said, oh no, that can't happen. So it is absolutely happening. There's more and more awareness growing. And thank goodness for platforms like yours that are not mainstream media, because the mainstream media won't touch this stuff. Oh yeah. They're sponsored by Botox. If you've ever seen the commercials on TV, so they're not going to touch this stuff, at least not yet. Maybe one day it'll get bigger and bigger and bigger. But
and don't even get me started on the fact that pharmaceutical commercials are legal in America when they're not legal anywhere else in the world.
Right. Exactly. But I just appreciate platforms like yours for even having me on, because this topic is so important to me. I really feel like, because I got such a mild version of this illness, I am able to use my voice, my writing skills, whatever, to raise awareness about this. So I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, absolutely, Megan. If you guys want to hear more about Megan's research and her story, we will link her books in the show notes. Maybe by this time, her 3rd book will be out. But yeah, and Megan, how can people connect with you online?
Yeah. So my website is just, I know we got to spell this out for people, but iatrogenicbotulism.com. So iatrogenic is the term they use for essentially when it's caused by a medical error. And on my website, I have so many resources, not only for sufferers of this illness, but also for providers, for doctors who are either caring for patients who have botulism or injecting people with Botox. And then my book actually is out. So the iatrogenic botulism one I mentioned is out on Amazon. There's also a link on the website. And then they can also find me on Instagram at Botox Truths. And that's where I try to be funny as as funny as I can and make memes and little things, reels to try and just get people's awareness and attention around this issue. The social media hustle. It's hard to, it's hard to convey really important, but also kind of complex information in a way that people are going to consume it. Right. So
yeah,
it's the struggle of the Instagram struggle, but I would love for people to check out the website or my Instagram account to just share with a friend who might be doing Botox. Just plant those seeds,
Sure.
like, hey, I heard about this woman where it went really wrong. You may just want to look into this.
Yeah. Well, again, Megan, thank you so much. Really appreciate having you on the show and such good insights into Botox and botulism and all the awareness that still needs to be raised on this topic. So thank you for sharing all of your story and your wisdom on this topic. And I'm excited for the word to continue to be spread on the dangers of Botox, and it needs to be talked about more, and it needs to be more commonly known. And so as much as I don't want to say, I'm glad you went through what you went through, I'm grateful for people who are willing to share their stories openly to help prevent it from happening to other people. So thank you so much for sharing your story and showing up in the ways that you have, and for your writing and your books. And so thank you so much. And
yeah, you're so welcome, Kristen. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And we'll catch you guys next time on the OrganiMama Podcast. Hey, bestie, if you're pregnant, postpartum, or you just brought a brand new human into your house, this is for you. Indoor air can be up to 100 times more polluted than outdoor air, which I did not know until we lost our first home to mold. Since then, air quality has been a non-negotiable for our family. We use Air Doctor purifiers because they're low EMF, super quiet, and they filter dust, mold, pollen, pet dander, smoke, VOCs, and 99.97% of flu and COVID viruses. Basically, it's one less thing for your postpartum brain to worry about. Check the show notes and get up to $300 off Air Doctor. Protecting your baby starts with the air they breathe.